It's 5 p.m. here in Lagos, Nigeria. Time for the world today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Coming up on the program, French President Emmanuel Macron to address the nation after Prime Minister Michel Barnier tendered his resignation following a no-confidence vote. Paris residents are reacting to the collapse of the government, saying that they reaped what they sowed. Plus, 2 kindergarten students in extremely critical condition after a gunman opened fire at an elementary school in California. Let's begin the world today. French President Emmanuel Macron is set to address the nation today following the no-confidence vote passed on his Prime Minister, Michel Barnier. A few hours ago, he hosted the Prime Minister who tendered his resignation. Barnier arrived at the Élysée Palace for the resignation formality. The veteran politician, who was formerly the European Union's Brexit negotiator, will be the shortest Prime Minister in modern French history after this. No French government has lost a confidence vote since Georges Pompidou's in 1962. The political turmoil further weakens a European Union already reeling from the implosion of Germany's coalition government and comes weeks before U.S. President-elect Donald Trump returns to the White House. Barnier's resignation means that President Emmanuel Macron must now seek a new prime minister. He'll be meeting with a visitor, a man many consider will be announced as Barnier's successor, François Bayrou. Bayrou, mayor of the city of Pau and leader of the centrist democratic movement, is a close Macron ally. It'll be a day of meetings for the president. He'll also be meeting allies and senior politicians as he prepares to replace Barnier. Outgoing Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu is also cited as a possible candidate for prime minister. There's no word yet on whether or not he will be meeting with President Macron today. And as we earlier said, the French president is set to address the nation this evening. His address is expected at 7 p.m. GMT. His rejected calls, however, to resign to break the political impasse in the country, saying such a scenario amounted to political fiction. Speaking to reporters on the sidelines of a visit to Saudi Arabia, the president had told reporters it does not make sense. It's frankly not up to scratch to say these things. It so happens that if I'm before you, it is because I was elected twice by the French people. I'm extremely proud of this, and I will honor this trust with all the energy that is mine until the last second to be useful to the country. Several prominent opposition figures and some voices closer to the presidential faction did suggest resignation could be Macron's only viable option. Macron has also accused the far-right National Rally of Marine Le Pen of what he calls unbearable cynicism in backing the motion which threatened to topple the government of Prime Minister Michel Barnier. One opposition politician does not believe President Macron should resign. His co-leader of the French far-right National Party, Jordan Bardella, he says instead he expects a new government to respect the will of the voters. Bardella, who met supporters at a book signing event on the release of his biography, says his party could not vote for a budget that envisions higher taxes that could hit the purchasing power of lower-income citizens. One Bardella supporter who turned up for his book signing said his rhetoric of putting France first appealed to her. Another said that the party was demonized in the past and a fresh face like Bardella is a winning strategy. The VOA's Lisa Bryant joins us now from Paris. Lisa, great to see you as always. It does appear, however, lawmakers were very riled up to hold this vote of no confidence against Barnier. The numbers even supporting the move were higher than the required numbers. Why did Barnier passing the budget rub them in the wrong way?
Well, you know, it was an austerity budget, and that's very hard to sell to your public. And that's basically the issue that many of the lawmakers had. It was a budget that wanted to raise taxes and cut spending. And there were a number of reasons, I mean, that stretch back to when the government was first nominated way back at the beginning of after, parliamentary elections in July. And so the far left was absolutely furious that Barnier even became, prime minister, because he's a conservative, and they thought that they should win. They should get their choice because they have the biggest bloc. There were a lot of reasons, but it was an unpopular budget. Nobody wanted to give any concessions to Barnier, who was there, sort of, trying to, have stability in the government, and he's a conservative. And so the far left and the far right teamed up. For the first time, they agreed on one thing, and they voted this no confidence measure, and hence the fall of the government for the second time.
Yeah, and it does indicate he probably has no political friends except the president, who's his biggest supporter, whom I suppose is sad to see him go. But he did have a good run as the EU's Brexit negotiator, but not so much goodwill at home.
Yeah, he's been in the political mix for a long time in France. I mean, he's a former, foreign affairs minister. He's been around. He's well respected, but not by this current political group in parliament, the far left and far right. His relationship with Macron is rather distant as well. But he was considered a guy, who was from the conservatives. When Macron formed a new government earlier this year, he struck a deal with conservatives. It's a very shaky, very small coalition, and the idea is that he could bring stability to the country that's really, really divided, because there's a large bloc from the far left in parliament and a large bloc from the far right, and a smaller third bloc, which is Macron centrist and the center right. And so, Barnier was respected within the EU for negotiating Brexit, and they thought, this is a guy who does not have a political career in front of him. He's in his 70s, and he could potentially bring stability and be sort of the go-to person. That clearly didn't work out with this particular parliament.
Let's talk about the choices now before President Macron. People think a leader of the centrist democratic movement, François Bayrou, is a likely candidate for prime minister. He's an ally of the president. He's also mayor of the city of Pau. Do you think that he will get the job?
It's really hard to say. The names floated, you've already named two of them. One of them is indeed François Bayrou. He's been in politics for a long time. He's been a presidential hopeful a number of times. He's a centrist guy. The other guy that you also suggested would have a possible chance would be Sébastien Lecornu, who's a defense minister. He's been in previous Macron government. He's well respected within the Macron group. And then another one is a former leftist socialist prime minister, Bernard Cazeneuve. His name has also been floated. And that could be an interesting one because, this leftist coalition won the largest block of votes during legislative elections earlier this year. And, this could be a concession to the socialists. The coalition goes from the far left France en Barbe party, which Macron's centrists refuse to do business with, but they've been angling to kind of break out that far left bit and have the socialists on their side. So that could be a maneuver, if it works, that could be quite interesting. So instead of siding with conservatives under Barnier for his past government, there is a potential he could go with the left, but more like the center-left socialists, and see if he could have enough, to form a new government, enough support within this very divided parliament.
What about Bardella? He's one of the very few politicians who's not calling for the president's resignation, but was also, well, the person primed to be leader of the French government in the last election in June. That didn't happen. Let's talk about his strategy, though. He's not condemning the president. He's not calling for his resignation. Some people think that his strategy is a good one. Is it a strategy, though?
Well, I think the first thing to think about when you think of Bardella, and he is, a lot of people feel, and that's a great question about whether it's a strategy. But first, his boss still is Marine Le Pen, and she has joined him in so far refraining from saying that Macron has to leave. But she's got a lot of problems. She's got a lot of political baggage. She's under, she faces a court case, and if they rule against her, it's for, you know, a parliament, this alleged hiring, you know, fake jobs in the EU Parliament. I think we've discussed this before, you and I. And if they find her guilty, then she can no longer sit any political office for a number of years. So in terms of strategizing, Bardella does not have that baggage. So he is possibly a candidate. I would find it hard to see Macron aligning with the far right, but, you know, we don't know. But he's certainly, a lot of people look at him potentially for the next presidential election, which theoretically is in 2027, unless surprises happen.
And President Macron's tenure is almost over. He's done 7 years, been in power since 2017. Why the need for him to resign at this time? Wouldn't that be too much of a political upset in France?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have to resign. That's one thing to know. You know, the political opposition, or some of it, is calling for him to resign. He still has 2 years ahead of him. A lot of people feel that at this point he's a lame duck president. His popularity is incredibly low. I looked at some of the recent polling, and between 50 to 60% of French want him to resign as well. But, you know, he said he's not going anywhere, as you had reported just recently. And, you know, 2 years is still a long time in politics, although it's hard to see how Macron can turn around his popularity and make a difference in the coming months. But we could be very surprised.
Yeah, we could be. And knowing how impatient the French people can be sometimes, there could be surprises up ahead. Let's talk about Barnier now and what happens to him after his role as Prime Minister. He continues on as caretaker, but what does he have to look forward to after now?
Yeah, first, we don't know how long that will last, that caretaker position, but for the moment he is. Macron speaking tonight, as you said. There's pressure on him to name a new prime minister and new government fairly quickly, or the prime minister will name the government. I would say, if I was Barnier, you know, he's had a very long career. He's been respected. I think he felt when he took this job, he was doing a favor to Macron. He had nothing to lose, and he kept saying this. He felt it a question of responsibility. If I were Barnier right now, I'd be enjoying a break and maybe retirement. But we're not sure what happens next. But I suspect he's going to be breathing a sigh of relief and disappointment that his tenure was so short and that he wasn't able to make the changes he hoped.
Well, you know, that break he could have had after he exited as a Brexit negotiator, but he came back to France and then took on a political position. I'd say he's still very much interested in politics, Lisa. But thanks again for your analysis on this issue.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Lisa.
My pleasure.
Let's turn now to the United States, where President-elect Donald Trump is still putting together his cabinet. On Wednesday, he announced he has chosen former Senator Kelly Loeffler to head the Small Business Administration. To choose Loeffler, a staunch supporter and donor, to co-chair his inauguration committee after he won the November 5 U.S. presidential election. President-elect Donald Trump announced her appointment yesterday. Of course, it still has to go through Senate. But Loeffler was appointed to the U.S. Senate seat from Georgia in 2019 to succeed former Senator Johnny Isakson, who retired. She lost it to Democrat Raphael Warnock in a special election in 2021. During her stint in the U.S. Senate, Loeffler served briefly on the Senate Agriculture Committee. The U.S. Senate Ethics Committee in 2020 cleared Senator Loeffler of wrongdoing in connection with stock trades after the wealthy Republican was criticized over share sales during the coronavirus outbreak. And in New York, police are still searching for the gunman who shot and killed at point-blank range health executive Brian Thompson. Thompson was shot in the back and leg at about 6:45 Eastern Time on Wednesday, just outside the Hilton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. Investigators say the words "deny, defend, and depose" were written on the shell casings recovered at the scene of the attack. They're now using facial recognition technology and a discarded phone to identify and track down the suspects, and are focusing on the surveillance image taken in a branch of Starbucks just before the shooting. In the house after the attack, Thompson's wife told U.S. media there'd been some threat against her husband, but did not provide details. Police say there'd been one suspicious incident at Thompson's home in Maple Grove, Minnesota in 2018, but that matter was cleared with no criminal activity detected.
On foot, 50-year-old Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, was shot and killed in what appears, at this early stage of our investigation, to be a brazen, targeted attack. This does not appear to be a random act of violence. The victim was in New York City to speak at an investor conference. It appears the suspect was lying in wait for several minutes. And as the victim was walking to the conference hotel, the suspect approached from behind and fired several rounds, striking the victim at least once in the back and at least once in the right calf. Many people passed the suspect, but he appeared to wait for his intended target. The suspect fled, first on foot, then on an e-bike, and was last seen in Central Park on Center Drive early this morning. The victim was removed to Roosevelt Hospital, where he was pronounced. We've been in touch with his family, his friends, and his colleagues, and they are very much in our thoughts and prayers at this hour. The full investigative efforts of the New York City Police Department are well underway, and we will not rest until we identify and apprehend the shooter in this case. Increase the reward in this case to $10,000. I want to be clear. At this time, every indication is that this was a premeditated, pre-planned, targeted attack. Millions of people will be enjoying the tree lighting tonight, among other holiday events, and the NYPD will be out there with them, keeping them safe.
The shooter appears to be a light-skinned male. He's wearing a light brown or cream-colored jacket, a black face mask, black and white sneakers, and a very distinctive gray backpack. The shooter steps onto the sidewalk from behind the car. He ignores numerous other pedestrians, approaches the victim from behind, and shoots him in the back. The shooter then walks toward the victim and continues to shoot. It appears that the gun malfunctions as he clears the jam and begins to fire again. The shooter then flees on foot northbound into an alleyway between 54th Street and 55th Street. Once at West 55th Street, the shooter continues to walk westbound on Avenue of the Americas, where he gets onto an electric e-city bike and rides northbound on the Avenue of Americas towards Central Park, where at 6:48 a.m. we have the shooter riding this bike into Central Park at Center Drive. At the scene, we recover 3 live 9mm rounds and 3 discharged 9mm shell casings. The motive for this murder currently is unknown, but based on the evidence we have so far, it does appear that the victim was specifically targeted, but at this point we do not know why. This does not appear to be a random act of violence.
From one shooting incident to another, this time in California, 2 kindergarten students aged 5 and 6 are said to be in extremely critical condition following a shooting at Feather River School of Seventh-day Adventists just outside of Oroville. The event happened yesterday afternoon, local time. The California Highway Patrol responded to 911 calls amid reports of an active shooter on campus at the Feather River School just outside Oroville, according to Butte County Sheriff Corey Honnier. Honnier confirmed 2 kindergarten students, both boys aged 5 and 6, had sustained gunshot wounds in the shooting and had immediately received medical aid. The sheriff added that officers began to search the campus and classrooms to ensure there were no individuals to pose a threat to the students or the faculty. He says a complex investigation has been launched with the help of the FBI, and officers believe they have identified the suspect responsible for the shooting, though he has not been named. Our correspondent Maria Bird joins us now. She's monitoring the events for us in Washington, D.C. Maria, there have been varying counts of whether the suspect is in custody, and another report says he's been shot dead. What is the true state of this shooting incident in California?
Yes, well, according to what we've seen thus far and what the true account is that he has been identified as actually being gunned down and dead at this time. It appears that the suspect, we're looking to see, obviously, in the United States and in California specifically, exactly to ensure that he is the individual. But the suspect, they are pretty confident that he is the one that they have identified that is at this time dead and has passed away. And so this is going to be an ongoing investigation as we talk about very young children, 5 and 6 years old, that are in critical condition in a hospital, and those conditions of them are remaining to be critical. They went in critically, and they still at this hour are critical.
And have police been able to establish a motive for the shooting?
Police are not quite sure. They're still, obviously, this is under investigation. It's a very open case at this time. They're trying to see exactly what could have been the motivation for someone going inside of a Christian school. As you mentioned, the U.S. has been tackling and battling with so much over the past few years as it relates to gun violence, and unfortunately, oftentimes, random acts of gun violence. And so this at this time is still investigating, but they are trying to put the pieces together to see if there's any correlation between the school, and maybe they're obviously researching to see his affiliations, some of his thoughts, some of what he may have been doing before this. And so this is going to definitely be something we'll see in the coming days coming out.
So the case still under investigation, and they're refusing to name the shooter. But what have they said about him? Perhaps any other information that could, help put at ease the minds of many of the parents in the school whose awards were present at the time of the shooting?
Yes, what they're basically saying is that this individual was found dead at the scene. He's identified as a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and they are looking to see, exactly what his affiliations were. They don't have much description on him just due to the protection and privacy of the investigation, but they're going to continue, obviously, to be able to provide us with further details. But because he has passed away, and what they don't want to do is release too much information before they're sure the family knows that he has passed away.
We understand that. Let's segue now into the other shooting that happened in New York, Maria, that of the health executive. So now we know from his wife there had been threats to his life. There'd even been an attempt in 2018. And it's very clear that, he was a target of the shooting. What are authorities, however, saying they will do with information that they're gathering about some of these threats to his life while he was alive?
Well, as you mentioned, this was very clear from the beginning that this was a targeted attack, that this was not a random act of violence, and so even before they had all the accounts from the wife, they knew that this was not a random act. And so I think that when you look back at probably the history, I'm sure that his wife and he has probably reported previously of these threats to his life. I'm sure there's specific security surrounding him with the position that he holds with United Healthcare. And so as a result of that, I think that this will continue to be ongoing to figure out exactly what was the challenge that individuals were having with him. Was this one individual? Was this something that there was some sort of a conspiracy that potentially could have been around the company? And so they're going to be looking at all angles of this story. And as we know, the individual was spotted in Central Park, but they still just have a description of this individual, that the gunman, and they're going to be continuing to find out exactly what was the reason for this. But the biggest piece at this time is that they have let the community know that there is no imminent threat to anyone else because this was targeted.
What do we know about Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Health, the kind of person he was, the kind of businessman he was, and the kind of CEO he was?
Well, when you look at, he was rather young for the role that he had. He recently, in the last couple of years, secured this role. And so, and we know that the healthcare system in the U.S. has been one that has experienced quite a bit of challenge over the last few years. And so the work that he's had to do and some of what he's done, the transformational work that, as his company would probably state, has been potentially a challenge. And so the question, though, is a personal piece, or is it something related to his dealings within the company and how he operated and ran the company? And so I think that's what's going to be continue to be investigated by the FBI as well.
Welcome back. Update now on the political crisis in South Korea. President Yoon Suk-yeol has come under investigation by the country's police for alleged insurrection over his short-lived declaration of martial law. Military officials have been questioned by MPs, and it's becoming clear how few of them knew about the plan, with the Vice Defense Minister saying he learned about it on the news. The opposition is looking to put motion to impeach the president to a vote on Saturday evening, even though his party mates say they will oppose it. Some supporters of Yoon's government say he is right to put in place martial law, but that the president was too gentle. A crowd of about 100 gathered in the capital, Seoul, today to reiterate their support for him. Many belong to a part of the right-wing camp, which is very pro-US and Christian. They believe that the opposition is full of supporters of North Korea who are out to overthrow the government. Yoon has not spoken publicly since an emergency vote in Parliament early on Wednesday forced him to reverse his decision. On the other hand, we'll see them in a bit. Many protesters gathered in front of the South Korea National Assembly. There they are. This evening, lawmakers said they would vote this weekend to impeach President Yoon. Some of them waved placards calling for Yoon's arrest in time with live music. Others chanted that they would stay put until the president is impeached and the will of democracy realized. To reactions now regarding the situation in South Korea. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has eventually commented, albeit a very brief remark, on the situation. Today, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian said China will not comment on the country's domestic affairs, but that China's position on the Korean Peninsula issue has not changed. Well, even U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has weighed in his thoughts on this, saying the U.S. is not aware of President Yoon's intentions to declare martial law. Speaking in an interview with Reuters in Brussels on the sidelines of a meeting of NATO foreign ministers, Mr. Blinken said it was vital that the process from now on play out peacefully and according to the rule of law.
No, that's correct. We were not aware. We're obviously watching this very carefully. Very good to see that the martial law edict was withdrawn by President Yoon after the Parliament voted against it. And for us, this is one of the most critical alliances that we have anywhere in the world. South Korean democracy is one of the most powerful stories anywhere in the world. It's very important that any disputes, differences, political differences be resolved peacefully and pursuant to the rule of law. That's what we're seeing now. That's what's so important to sustain. Look, I'm not going to get into the decisions that were made, political decisions that were made in South Korea. All I can say is, as Korea's staunch ally, as a country that also believes that Korea has such an important story to tell to the world because of the extraordinary emergence not only of a democracy, but a strong, resilient democracy, We want to see that sustained because it's in our interest and it's a partnership that's critical to us, but also because of what it says to the world. So I think it's very important how our allies resolve any internal differences. As I said, we're watching it closely, but it's good to see that the martial law declaration was rescinded and that the political process is moving pursuant to the rule of law. Look, again, I can't get into the decision-making that partners make. We are certainly not routinely informed of every decision that any partner may be making anywhere around the world at any given time. As I said, what's important now is to see this process play out peacefully and according to the Constitution and the rule of law.
We will deal with that when I get to that order of business. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Freetown.
Madam Speaker.
Whenever, okay.
Government may have its way, the opposition ought to have its say, Madam Speaker.
We're looking at the Caribbean nation of Bahamas at the House of Parliament when an opposition MP hurled the ceremonial mace through a window. We'll see that in there it is, throwing it through a window. Deputy Leader of the opposition, who doubles as Member of Parliament for St. Barnabas, Shenandoah Cartwright, ran for the mace during a heated session, closely followed by security operatives. He was reacting to the Speaker, Patricia DeVoe, allegedly blocking opposition leader Michael Pintard from addressing allegations in a U.S. indictment accusing members of the Royal Bahamas Police Force of presumed involvement in drug trafficking. The visibly shaken Speaker later addressed the House, calling it a dark day.
My Lord, you think it's right? Do you think it's right? Honourable members, remove that member from this place. Remove the honourable member for St. Barnabas from these proceedings. Honourable member for Freetown, I know you on the floor. Honourable member for Freetown, I know you on the floor, but let me make a small address. Citizens of this country, members of this gallery, and members of this honourable assembly. In pursuit of being the speaker today, I must say, this is a dark day in this political arena that we call politics. For the first time in my life, when I took the oath of office, I felt challenged and I was in fear for my life. I will review the tapes and I will apprise the country later of my findings. But during today's event, I was assaulted, I was almost hit. Thank God for a glass of water in front of me. The Honourable Deputy Speaker was given a blow to the head and has to go to hospital. And we have a police officer with terrible damage to his leg. God bless each and every one of you.
We're staying with politics, but this time in Georgia, where pro-EU protesters took to the streets of Tbilisi following the arrest of 4 main opposition parties. The demonstrations came after Georgian opposition media figure Nika Gavaramaya was detained by police after being knocked to the ground and falling unconscious. The government's decision to suspend EU talks has plunged the South Caucasus country into political crisis, with authorities claiming that they have thwarted an attempted revolution.
Okay, so they can knock to any door. So next could be me, you, whoever who's standing here, maybe who is sitting in front of TV or radio and listening us. So yeah, it could be whoever who has different kind of position or who is against the government and what they do.
So-called authorities, as they're calling themselves, they're raiding each and every office of
non-governmental organizations, also the political parties, opposition political parties, just to kill the spirit of this protest here. And when it comes to the future, I mean, we're gonna do all our best in order to put Georgia back to the EU track again.
I'm here for my future and my country because I want democracy and I want to live in Europe and not Russia. And I'm saying no to Russia.
Welcome back. And in South Africa, 6 bodies have been recovered over the past 2 days from an abandoned mine in Stilfontein. According to reports, hundreds of illegal miners are still underground. Police have been encircling the hitherto abandoned mine for the past 4 weeks in an attempt to dislodge illegal miners, also known as Zama Zama. The Stilfontein mine is about 150 kilometers southwest of the economic capital, Johannesburg. Authorities have been limiting water and food to the miners in an attempt to make them come up. It's unclear, however, how many are still underground. The Foundation for African Cultural Heritage, FARC, a coalition of 22 Nigerian NGOs, has rejected what it describes as the imposition of harmful neocolonial policies on Nigeria, calling for immediate action on 3 major global agreements: the Samoa Agreements, surrogacy regulation, and the WHO's proposed pandemic treaty. Addressing these issues at the World Media Conference in Lagos, FARC highlighted concerns over provisions in the Samoa Agreement, which they say will ruin the lives of Nigerians. The coalition condemned the continued influence of the European Union and global organizations in dictating policies that conflict with Nigeria's legal framework and societal norms.
We are saying you cannot regulate an illegality. If you read this paper, this document, you find that surrogacy is already illegal in Nigeria. It's called child trafficking. So surrogacy is illegal in Nigeria. And so the bill to regulate surrogacy, it is wrong. You cannot regulate a snake. A snake is poisonous, it's long, it's dangerous. You don't want to regulate it because it will still bite you. What you do is to kill the snake. So this bill, pending at the House of Reps, should be withdrawn.
The World Health Organization was instrumental in the wrongful deaths of millions of people globally by the wrong handling of the pandemic. And without having an audit of itself, its interventions, it is going forward to institutionalize these same interventions. But more than that, the pandemic treaty really is a financial agreement as to how, in the next time that there is a pandemic, all the paraphernalia of the pandemics that brought money, how they will be distributed.
If care is not taken, some of these moves that we have been discussing, from the pandemic treaty to the surrogacy bills that are being moved about right now in our legislature, to the abortion decriminalization bill also that is being carried about nicodemously in our legislature. If care is not taken, the combined effect of this vortex of evil is not only to compress our populations, but also by and by eventually to wipe us out.
You know how we love Christmas here on The World Today. Washington, D.C. has just unlocked the Christmas season, in case you're just getting the memo. Hundreds of people gathered to witness the lighting of the 2024 Christmas tree, a ceremony presided over by House Speaker Mike Johnson. The 80-foot tree from Alaska's Tongass National Forest will stand proudly on the west front lawn of the Capitol for the 2024 holiday season. The majestic tree, yeah, it is majestic, traveled over 4,700 miles to reach Washington, D.C.
Placed in front of the Capitol, we remember that this is the people's house, and that means that this tree is truly the people's tree. This holiday season, more than 100,000 tourists will tour the halls of this monument to our great republic. And the lights on this tree symbolize something. They symbolize the light that this season brings. As has been mentioned tonight, the light of hope and happiness and tradition. The light of joy that comes with having meals with family and friends. And of course, the light of gratitude that comes with reflecting on the blessings of the year that is past.
This year's tree made quite an impressive journey, traveling more than 700 miles by sea and 4,000 miles by truck to get from the country's largest national forest in Alaska to here on the west front lawn of the U.S. Capitol. Thank you to everyone who helped this tree make the trip.
All right, guys, are you ready? Here we go!
And this is a sight to behold every year in New York City in the United States. The tree lighting ceremony, a tradition that dates back to 1933. This year's ceremony was characterized by the festive buzz. Crowds gathered to watch and to catch a glimpse of the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree lighting. Officials say that this year's tree dazzles with over 50,000 multicolored LED lights. It will remain lit daily from 5 a.m. to midnight through to mid-January. On Christmas Eve, however, it will shine for 24 hours, while on New Year's Eve, lighting will end early at 9 p.m. to accommodate the festivities in nearby Times Square. The Christmas tree providing some glimmer of hope in the world we live in. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.